name is Writer Histories. Welcome to my channel.
My name is Ricardo Lopez, I'm 40 years old, and I live in Rio de Janeiro. I work as a maintenance technician and spent over a decade traversing the long corridors of the Hospital de Santa Casa de Misericordia. However, the night of that cursed Monday, May 18, 2009, is the one that still haunts me immeasurably. This story is entirely true, although I try to make my life easier by believing it was just a terrifying illusion. It was the last shift of the day, and my co-worker Carlos, a brave 45-year-old man, and I always stayed late to finish our tasks. We were casually discussing Sunday's soccer game when suddenly, a flickering light at the end of the corridor caught our attention. It was a sign that something was wrong. We walked to the location, to a room at the end of the corridor. But before we could reach the door, something strange happened. The corridor lights went out completely. We were only lit by the moonlight streaming through the windows. I remember distinctly feeling a shiver run through my entire body, in a silence so thick we could hear our own hearts beating. We continued walking until we finally reached the door of the room in question, room 412. It was one of those rooms we called the cold room, as strangely the temperature there was always lower. That night, however, the cold was so piercing that we could see our own breath vaporizing. We entered the room and darkness enveloped us like a somber veil. I tried to turn on the flashlight on my phone, but strangely the device had shut off. As I made a futile attempt to turn it back on, we heard a sharp scream echoing through the corridors. We looked at each other in terror, our blood ran cold, but we knew we had to get out of there. We ran out of the room in search of light and help, but the hospital seemed entirely different, as if we were trapped in a twisted nightmare. It was as if the souls of those who had passed there were somewhere nearby. Finally, we managed to return to the reception area, where we found Maria, the only night nurse on duty. A woman around 70 years old, she was shaken, her white hair disheveled, and her eyes filled with fear. We told her what had happened, and she, in shock, just handed us a crucifix, saying that there was something terrible in the hospital that night. At that moment, reality snapped back for me. Fear had overtaken me, but seeing Maria in that state made me realize that we needed to gather all our courage to do what was necessary. We returned to room 412 after ensuring that all the hospital lights were on. Fear still lingered over us, but we needed to do our job. As we entered the room, we saw that somehow the room lights were on and everything seemed normal. We fixed the burnt-out bulbs and everything returned to normal. However, Carlos and I were no longer the same. That night was etched in my mind, the shadows of the corridor, the noises, and the intense cold of that room, and especially that scream. I know that something beyond our understanding happened there. Despite everything, I keep telling myself that it was just a misunderstanding, a terrifying illusion we called supernatural. But on dark and silent nights, when everything is calm, the memories of that night come back vividly like never before and question me, was it really just an illusion? I grew up in a small town nestled in the heart of the Brazilian countryside. Our setting was marked by tranquility, only interrupted by the whisper of trees and the murmur of streams. But there was a shadow that loomed over us, the abandoned hospital. In 1993, it was abruptly vacated, leaving behind a dark enigma that intrigued everyone. At that time, I was 16 years old, accompanied by my friend Pedro. Our group was completed by the lively presence of Camila, a 15-year-old girl, and her older sister, Janena, who was 17. Boredom was our constant companion on those monotonous afternoons, fueling our youthful curiosity. That's how we decided to explore the dark corners of the town, immersing ourselves in the mysterious aura of the old hospital. Its peeling gray walls and broken windows stood like silent witnesses to a forgotten past, while dense vegetation enveloped it in a somber embrace. On a hot summer night in 1999, around 10 o'clock, youthful boredom led us once again to the abandoned hospital. We split up to increase the thrill of ghost hunting. For some reason, I found myself alone, exploring the west side, while Pedro, Rebecca, and Camila ventured into the east side. My steps led me to the old surgical block. The air there was chilly, permeated with the odor of mold that had taken hold in the bowels of the desolate building. I turned on my flashlight, illuminating a scene worthy of nightmares. rusty surgical equipment and old beds lined up along the walls, silent witnesses to a once glorious past now faded away. That's when I heard the whisper, a soft and sinister murmur echoing down the corridor to my left. My heart raced, but curiosity overcame fear. I advanced down the narrow, dark corridor until I came upon a small room. And there, hanging from the ceiling, was it, a hospital mannequin draped in a white dress, spinning slowly like a macabre dance of death. It looked so real, so vivid, that sweat broke out on my forehead and I fled, overwhelmed by terror. When I shared my experience with my friends, I was met with skeptical laughter. But as the days passed, we found out that we were not the only ones haunted by that sight. Locals shared similar stories, fueling rumors of strange activities and missing patients. Terrified by what we discovered, we decided to put an end to our adventures in the abandoned hospital. The town, once a haven of tranquility, now seemed shrouded in an aura of mystery and fear, its ruins guarding dark secrets that should never be disturbed. That experience left a profound mark on us, leaving invisible scars that we only understood years later. We learned that some stories, no matter how incredible they may seem, have deep roots in reality, and that true terror often resides where we least expect it. My name is Clara, and what I'm about to recount is an episode that marked my life 3 years ago when I was rushed to a hospital in downtown São Paulo. The intense headaches and persistent vomiting were the harbinger of a terrifying journey. On that gloomy dawn, I was hastily taken to an old hospital, immersed in dimness and the suffocating smell of ether and disinfectant. The corridors, dark and cold, seemed to pulsate with a sinister energy that sent shivers down my spine. I was greeted by Nurse Rebecca, a robust, dark-skinned figure whose kindness contrasted with the hospital's gloomy environment. She led me to the emergency room, where I encountered Dr. Enrique, an elderly doctor with a morbid expression but eyes that seemed to hold deep secrets. Despite his advanced age, Dr. Enrique exhibited a disturbing liveliness that made me uncomfortable. Shortly after my arrival, I plunged into a deep sleep, only to awaken in an even more frightening scenario. The emergency room was plunged into darkness, illuminated only by the flickering light of a distant lamp at the end of the hallway. I realized I was alone, surrounded by deafening silence, where only whispers seemed to echo. A chill ran down my spine as my senses went into high alert. What was once a hospital had now turned into a maze of fear and uncertainty, where every hidden shadow seemed to harbor a dark secret. Then, as if awakened by a sinister omen, the whispering intensified, turning into menacing murmurs echoing through the empty corridors. And I, trapped in this waking nightmare, knew that something terrible was about to happen. From the curtains swaying in the chilly wind that entered through the window, a shiver ran down my spine as I felt the urge to use the bathroom. It was then that I spotted a figure traversing the hallway. I thought about calling out to them, but something made me hesitate. A dark premonition seized me, and I decided to follow that figure resembling Nurse Rebecca. The only sound besides the footsteps echoing through the corridors was a faint, distant lament, like a sigh of anguish coming from one of the examination rooms. Upon entering that room, I was met with a scene that made my heart freeze with terror. A woman lying on the examination table, her skin pale and cadaverous, sobbing, and her tears were blood. In a panic, I ran back to the safety of my room, stumbling along the way. However, before reaching my refuge, I encountered Dr. Enrique, motionless like a somber statue in a dark corner. His vacant eyes seemed to stare into nothingness as his words echoed in my mind, sending chills down every fiber of my being. You always come back because you don't rest. Scared and confused, I returned to my bed, spending the rest of the night in a disturbing state of wakefulness, listening to the muffled lamentations from the adjacent room intensifying with each passing moment. At dawn, Dr. Enrique had disappeared, and Rebecca vehemently denied any knowledge of patients in that examination room. I later found out that the hospital had been closed for decades due to allegations of inhumane medical practices. As for Dr. Enrique, well, his death 30 years ago was surrounded by controversies related to his professional conduct. As for the woman in the examination room, I believe she is just one of the many tormented souls that roam that abandoned hospital. I never returned to that place again, but even now, sometimes at night, I can still hear her painful lamentations echoing in my thoughts, like an ethereal echo of a dark past that refuses to be forgotten. My name is Paulo, and I'm 34 years old. What I'm about to recount here happened in 2016, when there was an incident at the hospital in Minas. Up until now, I still haven't fully comprehended what I experienced back then, and I try to keep it at bay as much as possible. It's believed to have been a byproduct of my own state of distress and extreme exhaustion. Due to the nature of the work, the images aren't displayed, and the experiences I had were so intense that the lingering remnants still haunt me. No matter how much I try to rationalize them, it's just not possible. I acted as the sole surgeon on that endless Saturday night into Sunday morning, in a healthcare unit in a small town in the interior of the state with minimal resources. Things started to get strained due to underfunding, and strange cases emerged around 1 a.m. A man around 50 years old and another about 60 years old arrived at the emergency room with severe respiratory problems. Osvaldo's eyes expressed the terror his mind was feeling as I fought tirelessly for each single breath. Nurse Luisa, age 28, rushed to provide the necessary support. As I was filling out paperwork, tension induced an unexpected tremor. It felt like the ground around me had been replaced, taken over by an electric current, and the sensation of weight became almost palpable. A sudden cold ran through my skin, sending shivers down my spine. The disturbance didn't take long to manifest. Osvaldo's condition worsened to the point where I was forced to pronounce his death. Although it was a frequent occurrence in the region, my profession never becomes simpler, and the atmosphere grew even heavier. It was a tension that compelled me to avoid Osvaldo's death. The hospital emptied out and silence descended, with the dim light of the early morning more unsettling than expected. I was so exhausted that I had to return home and try to rest a bit in the waiting room before dawn. As I arrived at the hospital, my breath caught in my throat as the corridor began flickering and dancing synchronously between light and darkness in a strange ballet. At the end of the corridor, a figure of a man dressed in white stood exactly where Osvaldo had been before. He was looking at me, but his face was shrouded in shadows. For some reason, my instinct screamed to run, but my feet wouldn't obey. I was completely frozen as the man walked toward me, each step echoing through the silent corridor. I recognized that figure as Osvaldo, although he appeared younger, his eyes still filled with terror. Before I could do anything, the flickering light stopped and Osvaldo vanished, leaving only darker shadows and a deafening silence. My legs gave way, and I collapsed on the corridor floor, gasping, my heart pounding erratically in my chest. I woke up to Luisa shaking me worriedly, asking if I was okay. I felt confused. After all, I was lying in the corridor. I've never shared this experience with anyone before simply because I didn't believe it myself. I tried to convince myself that it was a manifestation of my fatigue, a hallucination resulting from many sleepless nights and the sudden grief of losing a patient. However, whenever my work keeps me up at night, I see familiar faces in the corner of my eye, the air grows heavy, and a sense of terror runs through my body. I try to ignore the fear I feel and the cold that kisses my skin, still trying to believe that it was just a product of my exhaustion. But the memory of that night, Osvaldo's face, and the gloomy corridors of the hospital refused to fade from my memory. The souls, if I can call them that, of the many people I've lost, still linger within those walls in the darkness of the night. And I, despite being frightened, continue my journey trying to do what I know best, saving lives. My name is Alexander, I'm 48 years old, and I'm a specialist in internal medicine, dedicating a significant part of my career to the oldest and most mysterious hospital in Porto Alegre. In these 23 years of experience, I've encountered a wide range of medical cases, from stories of resilience to deep traumas that have left indelible emotional marks. However, nothing could prepare me for the strange series of events that would unfold in the intensive care unit. The first indication arose on a hectic day, typical of hospital routine. An elderly patient, aged 65, began murmuring in a notably agitated state, referring to an elderly lady who, according to him, remained by his bedside, observing him with penetrating eyes. Although I tried to calm his agitation, that incident left a lingering unease in my mind. And it wasn't an isolated case. In the following months, a series of similar reports flooded the medical team, challenging our rational understanding and leaving us perplexed. We decided to investigate discreetly, fearing to cause unnecessary panic among the patients. As we analyzed the records of the patients who described these visions, a chilling discovery came to light. They all passed away within a few weeks after encounters with these inexplicable presences. A dark theory began to form in our troubled minds. Could these souls be the former inhabitants of the ICU, reluctant to leave behind the place where they found their ultimate peace? As a man of science, I found myself facing a dilemma between reason and the supernatural, between the tangible and the inexplicable. I sought the testimony of Valeria, a veteran nurse, whose memories proved even more disturbing. Her childhood story, lived in the corridors of the same hospital, revealed a dark connection between past and present. Valeria recalled a fateful night at the age of 13, when she witnessed the presence of an elderly figure by her dying father's bedside. The old woman's wrinkled face expressed a macabre serenity as she held the hand of the agonizing man. The outcome of that night was tragic, with Valeria's father passing away and the inexplicable disappearance of the enigmatic figure. From this frightening account, it became clear that the roots of the mystery stretched back decades, intertwining with the hospital's history and its sinister depths. We faced the fear of the unknown with counseling sessions for patients, offering emotional and mental support in the face of the inexplicable. However, even with our tireless efforts, the apparitions persisted, echoing like echoes of the past in a tormented present. Uncertainty hung over us, doctors, nurses, and patients, like a dense fog that refuses to dissipate. Today, as I continue my rounds in the ICU, the specter of an invisible presence seems to dance in the corners of my vision, whispering dark secrets to the ears of the most vulnerable patients. I face this journey with a mixture of fear and fascination, aware that in the hospital, life and death are not the only threads in the tapestry of existence. There is something more, something that transcends human understanding and challenges the limits of science, a mystery that continues to haunt us, even beyond the hospital walls, in an eternal dance between the beyond and the here.